Luke chapter 19 verse 8, the story of Zaccheus. But what I'm thinking about is the nature of faith and how it operates, how it drives you. Faith is a human thing. It's not a religious preserve. It's a human motivation. It's insight into what God is doing in a particular situation and moving on it. Faith is moving in on the big picture of what God's doing. Now, some people seem to have it easy. Have you met them? They seem to slide through life, it's smooth, as if they're born to be saints, like kind of nary a ripple in their lives. And then other people, it's just an uphill slog the whole way, and they finally make it as if it's just made it at the end. Zaccheus is kind of one of these latter type of people. It's sometimes the circumstances of your life enable you to become a certain kind of person. That's obvious, isn't it? It's an obvious truism. Sometimes those circumstances seem to contrive to make people lovely, and other ones operate in reverse, as if it's impossible to be nice. So how do you manage to make it against the odds? Well, this is faith, you see. I want to think about the faith of Zaccheus, as well as the way that Jesus met him. And Zaccheus gives us insight into the possibility of going against the odds of your circumstance. How do you conquer the hurdles? Zaccheus, tell me all about it, man. What was your story? So he had two sets of problems. One were the circumstances, and the other was the stuff that arose from those circumstances. The money, his money was a hurdle. Jesus said it's really hard for a rich person to get into heaven. It's really, really hard. He said, because those riches are a hurdle. I mean, me and Mark Zuckerberg have opposite problems. It's a hurdle. Finance is a hurdle. He had personal problems arising from his wealth. His trade as a tax collector opened him up to a temptation of dishonesty. You see, tax collectors, it was like a franchise. You bought into it, and then you set your own rates. You had to fulfill the quota, but then you set your own rates. And so you're bound by the circumstances of your trade to set it to suit you, just a little higher. We're not talking about out-and-out crooks. We're talking about ruthless businessmen. There's a temptation to overcharge, and there's a temptation to oppress. And if anybody brings you to law, which they were allowed to do, it will be a Roman tribunal, and you will be a Roman official being governed by Roman judges. So there's no way some poor local is going to get an adequate, just redress for the crime, for the overpayment. Well, the chances, you must admit, are pretty slim. And so all that forces you into a kind of ruthless hardness inside, and you start to see people as if they're a bit thick, a bit dumb, punters that need to be fleeced like sheep, just coming in with all the problems, and they're trying to con you, but you've got all the cards, all the tricks. Oh, sorry sir, can't pay till next week. You've got all the cards stacked in your favour, so you've got this tendency to become corrupt. And this is where Zaccheus went. According to Luke 19, that's certainly what it looks like. You become impatient with people, or unfeeling, or you're living at a low moral standard, and the way that you are governing your own life becomes the way that you see other people. The vice that you suspect other people of is the one with which you're most familiar yourself. Right? So watch out if you're a kind of hypocrisy hunter. Where are they, these hypocrites? Because it just shows that you're very conscious of those things. And so Zaccheus gets used to fraud. He gets used to fraud in himself, in his heart. And he's watching for other people try and do him while he does his best to do them. And you have to find people to be with you. And the only people who are going to be with you, who are going to provide fellowship, are people who understand what you're going through. And it's basically, it's like the alcoholic ending up with a circle of drunks who aren't going to tell him that he's alcoholic. Right? You fit in with the other guys in your circle, and you develop this hardness towards what you're doing wrong yourself. And of course it depends on how the rest of society views you. You know, as long as you're in your own circle, you don't actually get that objective viewpoint until somebody breaks in, like Jesus, from the outside. You know, apparently, most of the people who signed the 1776 Declaration of Independence, which starts, all men are created equal, most of them were slave owners. Is that interesting? So that you've got this circle of landowners, of prosperous businessmen, who from their own position don't see the irony of what they're declaring. They didn't consider where they were. No, public opinion is a big deal, and public scorn too. And do you remember reading about that guy who got wrongly put on a sex offenders list? You see, public opinion is a killer. Imagine if you get it wrong. And so Zaccheus had all these hurdles to overcome. He was trapped in an opinion of himself, trapped in the opinion of the world, trapped in a business that made him immoral. And so, in a sense, think about this, you become what other people think of you. Jesus broke in, Jesus broke through, but in the process, Zaccheus also was breaking through to Jesus, and that's where those two met. Let's leave it there. God bless.